But at the end of the day, it means more money for a host community to do whatever it is, whether they want a new town hall or they want to pave the roads better or improve their schools, offer senior services that they've not offered, summer camps for kids. All of those things can be done when you have money to do them with.
A question I'm sure people ask themselves when they hear of a wind or solar project being proposed near them is, what's in it for me? Or how will it affect me? Other than driving by and seeing it, there could be a financial impact to you as well. That's what we're going to talk about today. This is Plugging In. I'm Barry Wygel. Welcome to Plugging In, powering our way to a brighter and healthier New York. I'm your host, Barry Wygel. Each episode on this podcast, we will discuss a different topic related to clean energy, explaining complex topics in a way you can understand. Become part of the community as we help to make a brighter and healthier New York.
As the sun crests on the horizon, a new day dawns in our state. A new hope for tomorrow is rising, a clean future we create. Tomorrow we breathe easier, tomorrow the skies are clear. Today we are plugging in, the future of New York is here.
Joining us on this episode of Plugging In is Marguerite Wells, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Clean Energy New York. And today we are going to talk all about hosting projects. So we're talking about the towns, the communities that renewable energy projects, especially the larger utility scale projects, where they reside. So Marguerite, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So the big overarching question, why would a community want to host a big project like this?
Usually the reason is because it ends up being a lot of money to the community, both in payments to the individual landowners that host equipment and then also various tax agreements with the hosting jurisdictions, towns, county, and schools.
Like a lot of this, it's a little more nuanced. It's not one big check that gets written. There's landowner payments, pilot payments, and we're going to get into definitions and what that all is. But when you're designing a project and proposing a project, take us through what some of those buckets are that money goes into that will eventually benefit a local community.
So in my experience, for all the money that a project is going to pay into a local community, about half of that goes to the landowners themselves in land payments every year. And then the other half of that goes to the jurisdictions in some form or another of what amounts to a tax payment. Based on precedent from existing projects, one generally has a pretty clear idea of how much those payments are going to be in round numbers well in advance of the project actually being built. So you can go in the door to a community as a developer and say, hey, I'm thinking of building this 100 megawatt wind or solar project in your town. We'll be spending this many dollars a year on your landowners, and we'll be spending that many dollars a year roughly in local taxes. And those local tax payments can be divided up lots of different ways. There are a number of different mechanisms so that in different communities there are different preferences for how to divide it up, and there are options on the table for that. But at the end of the day, it means more money for a host community to do whatever it is, whether they want to reduce their local property taxes for all the other residents, or they would just want to add services that they haven't been able to afford before. They might want a new town hall, or they want to pave the roads better, or improve their schools, offer senior services that they've not offered, summer camps for kids. All of those things can be done when you have money to do them with. And there's a lot of different ways it can be done.
And so typically this is land, the land that you're building on, this is land that's being used just as part of a private parcel. This could be, a farmer's has X amount of acres and they're going to use a portion of it for a renewable energy project. So that's not necessarily paying a significant amount of property tax on that land. So then a renewable energy project comes in and says, I want to do this. What does it do to the bottom line of that town or county in terms of property taxes?
So it raises the assessable amount in that county. So it means that you have more valuable infrastructure that you can raise money against for the county. And so the county can either keep their tax rates the same for all their existing residents and just raise more money using the same tax rate, or they can decrease the rates on everybody else because they're already getting enough money in the door from the energy project. So either way, you either get more money or you reduce the burden on everybody. And there's reasons to do one versus the other, and communities make different choices according to their circumstances.
And it's not just theoretical, right? We've seen this successfully happen in New York with projects that you yourself have been involved in.
Absolutely. There have been a number of towns and counties that have zeroed out property taxes for quite some time because of the renewable energy project that is paying so much into the town budget there's no need to levy taxes on the residents at all. And there are communities that have done enormous build outs of local infrastructure because they've had the money to do it, improving the schools, improving the roads, all that kind of thing, offering services they never used to offer before. So all of those things are being done in dozens of communities across New York State and have been for a long time.
And we recently had the chance to visit Lewis County in upstate New York and got to see what the impacts of wind energy has been on that county and especially in Louville. And, how could you describe, other than, going to watch the video, because we're going to post it in the description and people should definitely watch it to see this in front of them. But what's it like up there seeing this town that's been transformed by the wind energy and the money, really the money that it brings?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the best spokespeople in Louville recently passed away. He was the town supervisor when the first wind project was proposed there years ago, and he was dead set against it. He thought it was going to be bad for his community, and his constituency he most cared about were farmers. What he saw happen, despite his opposition, the project went forward, and what he saw happen for the farmers who participated changed his mind about the project to begin with. He saw that farmers were investing the money from the turbines into their farms, because that's what farmers do. The minute they have some extra money, they put a better roof on the barn, or they buy a better tractor, or they expand their herd, or they fertilize their fields. All the things that farmers do with money were getting done in spades, and it was a huge boon to the agriculture industry in Lewis County to have the wind turbines come in. It also helps balance the income that farmers face because there's a lot of volatility in the farming market. It's really hard to go from year to year, and some years you're making a huge loss and occasionally you make a profit. And the money from the wind farms balanced that out. And so farmers didn't have to go out of business as often and could make a living on small farms in perpetuity. And he saw that as a benefit. And so it really changed his mind. But a lot of folks in the county have seen similar benefits in their own niches. Because there's more money to go around, the downtown in Lewis County in Louville is a well-kept downtown. The historic buildings have been renovated with the money from the historic funds that are on offer from these projects. The school is one of the nicest public schools I know of in the state of New York. Amazing sports facilities, amazing physical plant, all of it straight up wind farm money.
Yes, and like I said, you can see this for yourself in the video that we produced, and we'll post a link in the episode description. So there's a lot of benefits for individual landowners that lease it, and then there's the aggregate community benefits. So kind of take us through how that sum of money is determined. So essentially, I'm asking, what is a pilot? What's a host community agreement? What's a community benefit agreement? How are these come to as agreements?
So, like any business or asset of any kind that is physical, it is taxable. There has not, until recently, been a generally accepted means of how to assess a wind or a solar project. And so rather than having the developer and the local assessor argue about the best method, because it's not a cut and dry thing on how to do it, the approach in New York and in many other places is to do what's called a pilot agreement. Many other industries do it as well, and certainly other energy projects do. All the energy projects in the state of New York have had pilot agreements. Pilot stands for payments in lieu of taxes. And so rather than just being taxed through a regular assessment methodology, which hasn't existed until recently, you just come to a dollar figure agreement. In this case, in the case of wind and solar, it's just based on the size of the project. And so, based on the precedent of the projects that have been built before, you can say, well, these 50 projects before spent in the following range of dollars. So generally developers propose amounts that are similar to what other projects pay. It's in part determined from what the project can afford based on the expected price they'll get for their energy. And so that can be in only a pilot agreement, and no other side agreements, or it can be in a combination of a pilot agreement and some side agreements. One of the things, so pilot agreement there's two different ways you can administer it, either individually through every town and county and school district that a project touches, or it can be done through the county industrial development agency itself, which then brokers a deal with all of the taxing jurisdictions that touch the project. So it's kind of a one-stop shop, in other words. So most projects use the IDA pilot as the approach, and in some places that's going to be the only taxes that the project will pay into the community. Some communities also like to use something called a host community agreement, which is essentially a side agreement with the towns themselves that host the project for some additional funds. And this came about because if you look at the tax bills that any resident in New York pays, There is a chunk of taxes that go to the school district, a chunk of taxes that go to the county, and a chunk that go to the town. And invariably, the town gets the smallest slice of those three chunks of money. The school district always gets the most. It gets 50% or more of the total tax dollars that anybody pays. The county usually gets something like 30%, and the town gets between 10 and 20%. And in the case of energy projects, wind and solar projects, that didn't seem fair from the town's perspective because the projects do have an impact. If you have a wind farm in your town, you know about it. You look at it, sometimes you hear it. You have to be around big trucks sometimes. And although those impacts are accounted for in the permitting process, they're not accounted for in the daily life of the people of the town. And so people in host towns said, hey, we're getting the fewest dollars and we are hosting the impacts. The school district isn't having an impact from the wind farm because wind farms don't send children to school. So it's not as though there are additional costs that the school district is incurring because of this wind farm. There aren't. And same thing at the county level. The county doesn't have an impact from a wind farm. Only the town does, and they get the fewest dollars. And so the host community agreement came out as a way to try to get more money into the hands of the host towns themselves outside of the pilot agreement, because the way the pilot agreements work, they have to be divided out by law in the same ratios the taxes are already divided out by law, unless a special agreement would be made. And nobody wants to make that special agreement because that would require the county and the school district to get less than their usual share. And they're never going to agree to get less. And so the only thing you can do is make a side agreement with the town to give them a little extra on the side. Additionally, a few years ago, the Department of Public Service, or really the Public Service Commission in New York, put together a program called the Host Community Benefit Program. And so this is only just starting to get rolled out in real life now. And many developers and towns don't even know that it exists. But what it is responsive to is the fact that almost everybody who thinks about hosting an energy project in their town, the first thing they want from it is cheaper power bills. Everybody wants cheaper power bills. And until now, there had not been a way to actually make the power bills cheaper because the energy developer of whatever kind, whether it's a nuclear plant or a solar plant, it doesn't matter. They aren't the utility company who controls the power bills. So they have no way to make somebody's energy bill lower until now. So this host community benefit program that the Public Service Commission instituted says there are going to be a certain number of dollars from a wind or solar farm that get paid to the utility to defray the bills of the people in the town that the project sits in. The challenge right now, as the project currently exists, is that it doesn't end up amounting to very many dollars. And so it doesn't feel like much of a win to the folks in the town because depending on the size of the town and the size of the project you're hosting, occasionally there's a win. If you have a very small town and a very big project, it amounts to a lot of dollars. If you have a big town with a lot of people in it and a smallish project, it's just pennies a year and it's not enough to really win hearts and minds. So although the program exists, I think it could use reconfiguring in order to be more effective at doing the thing it set out to do, which is to help defray people's electric bills.
What are some of the creative ways that you've seen towns use this money?
So towns do a lot of different things with host community money because it's kind of wide open. There aren't really restrictions on it. It just has to be agreed upon by the town board. So one town, as an example, they had a picnic shelter that was kind of fallen into disrepair. And so an energy storage project rebuilt the picnic shelter. In another town, there was a historic building that they had not been able to raise the funds to repair. But the local historical society really wanted to occupy the building, but there was a lot of work that needed to be done to make it even safe, much less doable. So they took the money and repaired the historic building that, was on everybody's list of things to do, but nobody had a spare $500,000 to do it with. All of a sudden, a project gets that done. I've seen examples where you can make public walking trails around the outside fence of a solar farm that connect back to existing walking trails. So it basically expands the public walking trail network without any actual cost to anybody. So it's those kinds of things that when you really dig in a community and say, what do you need? What do you want? How do you think you could turn money and bulldozers into something that your townspeople would actually really like to have? And when you can have that conversation candidly and early enough in a project's life that you don't run out of time to execute on it, you can get buy-in because all of a sudden people see something in it for themselves.
And elected officials are the ones at the table, making these agreements, signing the deals. What's the public's role in all of this?
The public's role is staying engaged with their local elected people to make sure that they hear some of the ideas for projects that could use the money. Because sometimes folks say, well, I don't even know who sits on my town board and I don't trust that they're going to do the right thing with the money. But at the end of the day, they're elected by very small numbers of people. They are very much accountable to their electorate in their own towns. And so, showing up at town board meetings is never on anybody's fun idea of things to do on a Wednesday night in November. But that is how democracy happens every day in our own towns. And showing up and being polite and respectful, but persistent, and say, here are some things that our town could use, that's how to get it done.
And like you said, there's the more fun ideas where it's rebuilding pavilions or fixing up a road or doing things like that. But you mentioned earlier, and it's worth reiterating, some towns decide to just use it to, lower the tax burden to the point where some towns have completely eliminated town taxes for a portion of time because of a renewable energy project.
Yep, that's right. And the challenge with that approach is that you eventually have to assume that the project is going to go away, because it is. They generally have 20 to 30-year lifetimes. And when the project ceases to pay taxes because it doesn't exist anymore, you need to have a tax levy. And because of the New York State tax law that you're not supposed to raise your tax levy more than 2% unless certain circumstances, it just makes it hard for the town to dig itself out of a hole from zero taxes back to full taxes again. It's not easy from a finance engineering perspective, much less is it very popular from an elected person's perspective, because all of a sudden you went from having a town with no taxes to, oh gosh, we have taxes again.
So maybe more practically is just lower them a little bit as
Lower
one of
them
the
a little bit
solutions.
and invest a little bit. It's some of each, I think, is probably the best plan.
Right, because the number one question I think people ask themselves when they hear of a project of any size getting proposed near them is, how is this going to impact me personally? And maybe I'm not going to go use that pavilion, but there are ways like this, townwide tax lowerings or things like that, where it will impact them, and especially if this program catches on of lowering electric bills in a vicinity of a project, which also could be a plug for community solar and projects like that, because then you do see the direct benefit of projects like that.
All of these mechanisms do require people who care about the quality of their community that they live in. They care about the quality of the school because they have children or relatives who have children who would attend them. They care about the quality of the roads. They care about having a nice town hall that's warm and dry and safe. It's more challenging in communities where there is a large population of second homeowners because they don't care about any of those things. Kids don't go to the school. They don't enjoy the town hall. They don't have connections with most of their neighbors and want to see their neighbors benefit even if they don't see that for themselves. And so there's been some interesting research showing that the strongest opposition is in places with the most second home ownership for that reason.
Very interesting. Marguerite, thank you so much for joining. I'm sure we'll have you back.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Plugging In. I hope you learned something, and I hope you share this knowledge with someone else. It would be incredibly helpful if you leave us a 5-star review wherever you found this podcast. If there's a topic you would like us to cover in the future, or have a question about clean energy, send us an email at podcast@aceny.org. You can follow us on social media using the links in the show notes, or consider joining our Clean Energy Supporters mailing list at aceny.org/support. Your support is crucial to creating a brighter and healthier New York. I'll see you next time.
Tomorrow we breathe easier. Tomorrow the skies are clear. Today we are plugging in.